Iron City built. It's time for the Steel City Nation podcast. Here's your host, Mark Mariday.
Hey, Steel City Nation, my guest today, Bill Bender of the Sporting News. He's been a writer there since 2013, and he is an Ohio graduate. Graduated what, 2007, Bill?
No, 2002, man. Don't make.
Wow.
I wish it was 2007.
I'm trying to keep you young.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take 2007. Yeah, I'm 41 years old. Went to OU, graduated in 02. Ohio, Michigan, PA, Indiana. Grew up with the Rust Belt sports like everybody else. And and like everybody else, very passionate about it.
Did you play sports in high school?
I did. I played at a small Catholic school in Lancaster, Ohio. It was Fisher Catholic. When you grow up in a town like that, it's like every other small town in both states. Football was everything. We were born with that in our hands. Played some basketball, ran track, played baseball growing up, but ended up running track. And then, we live in Pickerington, Ohio, and trying to think, the Steelers don't have any Pickerington guys, but it's a town of 20,000 here in Ohio. There are 6 active NFL players.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, guys like Pat Elflein and Jake Butt and Vaughn Hamilton, who has some success. I mean, it's quite a factor here so my kids are growing up in that, and it is as competitive as ever.
Your kids in school?
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old boy and a 7-year-old daughter, and we play basketball, softball, baseball, lacrosse, football, and it's what our family is all about. My wife, she was a college bowler at Kent State, so we definitely like keeping them busy. And even in the COVID pandemic, it was hard to do, but we were able to do that effectively. And I coach I coach my daughter's team. I'm an assistant for my boys' team, and I officiate. That's a new one. I started reffing this year, and that's been an experience because it's always a foul apparently. And we do all of that, and I find some time to write about college football in between.
You're a busy man, I could say. Did you say your wife was a college bowler?
Yeah, she bowled at Kent State, and
nice.
So we always laugh about it. Whenever we go bowling, one of our first dates, I always tell people we went bowling, and I think she bowled like a 240. So, and I'm your standard 120. I'm happy guy, and drink a couple beers and I'm good. Well, we go back and the cashier says, "Well, nice score, son." And I was like, "That's not my score." And she's very good at that, very passionate about it. And I can't do the hook. I don't know if you can. She can definitely throw the hook.
No, my wife was she bowled in high school. She lettered all 4 years. She lettered in high school, and that's the one thing. Like, she's not real competitive or anything, but like if we go a little family outing or something like that to go bowling, look out, man. Her fangs come out, and she goes after me when it comes to that. So it's actually kind of cool to see her be like that, because my older daughter and my son and myself are ultra competitive in just about everything we do. It doesn't matter what we're doing. And then she's kind of laid back until we get her at the bowling alley, and it's all hands on deck then. Hey, let's talk some college football a little bit. What were your likes and dislikes of this season? This was an insane season between teams saying they're not going to play, end up playing, some playing a full schedule, some playing a partial schedule. Well, can you share a little bit about that with us?
I've done college football for Sporting News since 2013, and I was kind of split in time between college football and the fantasy desk, and full time since 14, which coincides with the playoff era. I had to tell you, this was the most challenging year yet, because I'm such a creature of routine with my content. I start thinking about stories for next year now. Well, maybe not now, but in a couple days, and just having games canceled and teams wiped out, and the fact that Ohio State played in the championship game short players. I'm not making an excuse, but every football team has dealt with this, and made it really challenging. I think the athletic directors, the presidents, those people deserve a lot of credit for how they got this season in.
Yeah.
It wasn't, but from watching college football, it's about the tradition, the pageantry, the fans, the bands, the fight songs, and that's what made this a bizarre season. But definitely the most challenging. Didn't travel much because we're just not traveling at work right now, and
right.
and that's okay. And learned how to use these Zoom calls. So you got to take advantage of those.
Yeah, it's been refreshing to me from that perspective. I teach and I get to use Zoom all the time. I've become quite proficient at it. I've upgraded my stuff so that I can deal with my students better and do better with my podcast. So Ohio State, they get to the Big Ten championship. They win that. They go on in the playoffs. But would they play seven regular season games? In your opinion, is that a big enough body of work to put them in the position they were in? Or do you feel like maybe, and don't get me wrong, they were a really good team. Okay. I still think they have a ton of great players, but some of those teams that got to play 10, 11 games and actually maybe were 10-1 or whatever. Do you feel like there was an unfair competitive edge there because Ohio State's a perennial powerhouse?
Well, okay, so are you like a Penn State or Pitt guy? Then I'll know how to answer this. But
I'm a Pitt guy, but I got to tell you this, and I tell everybody this. I'm a sport fan first and foremost. Okay, right. I'm a football fan. I'm a hockey fan. I'm a baseball fan. My allegiance runs deep with my teams, but when it comes to it, I am a realist too. So
yeah, and that's what. So I was curious because I know what the temperature was in Ohio. I live here. I've lived here. I know when you watch Ohio State win 4 straight Big Ten championships, you know they're the best team in the conference.
Yeah, sure.
You know that they went through some extraordinary things with COVID. The numbers here have been high. They play 2 games in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Some rules got bent in their favor. There's no question about that. But my response to that was generally, and I'm like I said, I'm an Ohio University grad. I'm not a Buckeye fan by any means. So, they were the best team in the Big Ten. They were, they went through a lot of things. I think when Indiana started making a gripe about it, I was like, well, they beat you on the field, right?
Right.
Were they more deserving of a Texas A&M, a Cincinnati? I don't know. I mean, that's the question. That made it one of the most things. But then they go to that in the playoff and they prove it with Clemson. Yeah. Like one of the things with this sport right now, and it's really impacted the sport, is it is a 3-team sport right now. It is Clemson, it's Ohio State, it's Alabama. And it's right now the pecking order would be Alabama 1, then you got a 2A, 2B situation. And 4 is a moving target. And 4 through 130, they don't have the talent that school has. And I think that's part of the reason they got their way.
Is it talent or is it the coaching? Is it the system?
It's talent, it's development, it's coaching, it's an institutional kind of focus, I would say. I mean, it's no different. I think you see that in the NFL in some ways. There are certain franchises that are built different than others. And whatever happened in Pittsburgh this year, they are one of those franchises, right? They've been built. There's a standard. I know the saying, the standard is the standard. Ohio State's one of those places in college football, right?
Yeah.
You shook your head like I said something wrong.
No, I'm just not a big advocate of those. Let me just explain. I'm not an advocate of those sayings simply because if the standard is the standard and you keep having to do the same thing over and over again, you should upgrade your standard. So what's coming up behind it is just as good as what you had there before. I don't see that happening where that comment comes from on a regular basis on my end.
Oh, well, that's fair. I mean, but you're talking about NFL teams. In college, Ohio State expects to win a national championship every year.
They should.
And they compete for one every year.
They should.
Alabama, it's national championship or bust. Clemson, it's become that. And I think Ohio State, the thing that I always tell people about those 3 schools is what Alabama and Ohio State in particular do better than everybody else is they recruit 5-star talent. They get the most guys. They develop that talent in 3 years, and those guys are first-round picks when they leave. Those schools, and then the bonus of it is, and we did this article last week, you could have formed a team exclusively of Alabama players and exclusively of Ohio State players in the NFL right now. You could do that. Quarterback be a little shaky with Haskins for Ohio State, but Justin Fields is coming. That game would be arguably as good as some of the wild card games.
Who's better, Fields or Haskins? at the college level?
Oh man.
You saw them both.
I did. I think Fields had 2 years in the system, and I think that's what makes the difference. Fields started for 2 years. I'm a big guy on multiple year starters going to the NFL. You know, people like to call Joe Burrow a 1-year wonder. He's not. He played for 2 years in LSU's system, and you saw what he brings to that Cincinnati franchise that's been
Absolutely.
so downtrodden. They've got a good one there. Now they got to protect him.
Yeah.
Fields is very interesting to me, Mark, and here's why. Because before this season, it was assumed he's going to be the number 2 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And now, because of the way Haskins kind of flamed out quickly, I think people were unfairly holding that against Fields. Like, he was over analyzed. I would still take him as the second quarterback in the NFL draft, but he's going to be involved in a lot of combine type conversations with Zach Wilson, Kyle Trask, Mac Jones even. And whereas the gap was supposed to be between Lawrence and Fields, I think Fields is probably going to be more closely associated with those other guys. The Trevor Lawrence discussion should go like this. It should be, with the first pick in the NFL draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence. That's the end of that discussion as far as I'm concerned.
Do you feel like there's any downside to Lawrence though? Because, he lost the Heisman. I mean, I kind of feel like that was his for the taking. I get that he missed some games because of COVID and it wasn't typically the type of year he wanted to have, but is he a surefire, bona fide? He's going to be a franchise quarterback who plays 12, 15 years, makes his Pro Bowls. Is that what you see in him?
Well, I mean, the organization's going to have something to do with that. I mean, talent-wise, yeah, you're looking at probably the best quarterback prospect since, at least Andrew Luck. He gets lumped in with here's the 3 guys he gets lumped in with the most: Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, John Elway. 3 no-doubters. Like, there was no doubters. And what did those 3 quarterbacks have in common? They never won the Heisman either. Peyton probably should have won it. John Elway, maybe he would have won it. Andrew Luck was right there. Trevor Lawrence might be the best college football quarterback to not win the Heisman. And I want to see what an NFL team does with him. This is an honest opinion. I think Clemson misused him in some ways. And I say that, I don't say that they developed him properly and everything, but he didn't have to run as much as he did. I thought he was more effective in the pocket and throwing the ball down the field. And that's what he's going to do in the NFL. His legs are a bonus, and Dabo used that, and they used that effectively. But I think he's a guy that you could just sit him in the pocket and let him work.
Do you like the style of quarterback that's coming through in the NFL today? Because we're seeing more and more guys that are doing, 1-2 reads and boom, they're off to the races. I actually like Lamar Jackson. I like Joe Burrow. I'm not a big Mayfield fan. I will be completely upfront about that.
Okay.
But in terms of Lamar Jackson, I watched him. He ran for that 38-yard touchdown. They flooded one side of the field. They shifted the pass protection. He looked off, everything moved, and he had a clear lane the rest of the way. To me, that running quarterback has become more prevalent in the NFL than what it had been in years. What's your opinion on that?
Well, and I'll clarify what I said about Lawrence. Like, he had to become a runner. So Clemson didn't necessarily misuse him so much as they used him maybe more creatively than he'll be used in the pros, if that makes sense. I don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to have 10 carries a game in the NFL.
No.
Or 6 or 7 carries, or taking red zone touchdowns like Clemson had. So that's an unfair thing for me to say they misused him when he had the prolific career he did. That said, to your point, with running quarterbacks, so to speak, Lamar, Mahomes can use his legs to make plays. Russell Wilson does that. To me, it's not so much they're running the ball, it's the hits that they take when they do. It's getting out of bounds. It's getting down. Aaron Rodgers did this for years.
Yeah.
And he still can make plays with his legs at 38 years old. So it is a part of the game. It has changed the game. There are a lot of very young quarterbacks in the AFC right now, and there are a very lot of old quarterbacks in the NFC right now. And that's what's interesting is Mahomes is the guy, but Josh Allen is playing well. Lamar's playing well. I think, like I said about Burrow, I think he's going to be interesting. And then the AFC is going to get Lawrence and Fields in their, you know what I mean, in their conference. Whereas the NFC, and full disclosure, is our mutual friend Mike DeCourcy probably told you, I'm a Packers fan. So I'm looking at that conference, and you see the old quarterbacks, and you're wondering what's next for Green Bay, what's next for, I guess, Tampa Bay when Brady's done, or New Orleans, and there's an opening for some quarterbacks there. But I think the AFC, it's going to be a little bit tougher with all those really good young quarterbacks.
That puts, actually, being a Steeler fan, that really puts them at a disadvantage. They've got a massive decision to make, and they can't do anything else until they make that. I mean, they either pay Ben $41 million next year, or they cut him loose, or he retires, and it costs them 23 toward the cap. And then they got to decide, is Mason Rudolph the guy, or do we try and trade up and get ourselves one of those guys like maybe Trey Lance at the bottom, or a Kyle Stark? Because, quite frankly, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, they're all going to be gone. Or do we go ahead and look for somebody else who can come in and fit the system? I was a guy who was okay with, if they'd went after Jameis Winston, I thought he could have came into the system, and really, at his age, he's the same age as Mason Rudolph, but he has 5 years of starting down in Tampa. I would have loved to have seen them bring him in maybe a year under Ben walk this year, let Winston take over,
So you think Ben comes back next year?
All indications are that Ben is going to come back at this point, but whether the Steelers actually want to bring him back based on the amount of money they owe him and how it's going to send ripples through their salary cap. I mean, you probably know this better than I do. The cap's going to drop. Am I correct? I'm hearing it's going to be at about 179, maybe.
Probably will. And so that is interesting that you bring it up, because we already talked about those other young quarterbacks within the division. Regardless, I'm kind of in the middle with Mayfield. I'll say this about him. I don't think he's terrible. I don't think he's the greatest quarterback ever. I do think he's injected what Cleveland needed. They needed somebody to come out there, and his ways, I mean, he gets the Favre comparisons a lot. He's not there yet, but I think Kevin Stefanski's designed an offense that has maximized what Mayfield can do. And I think that's a fair assessment of him. Joe Burrow, if he comes back healthy, he's going to be pretty good. Lamar, he's really good. He's dynamic, but it's you wonder, okay, they can dominate with their running game. What happens when a team shuts their running game down? And he's always going to face that question, though he answered one with the playoff victory. So that leaves Pittsburgh, the team that's they've dominated that division for decades. I know this. I've got fans, Bengals buddies and Browns fans on my text every day.
Yeah.
So it is a very interesting decision to what they do, because they're probably not going to get one of the quarterbacks in the draft this year, unless you said Trey Lance would be that. He's not going to start right away. So do you wait a year, and then a couple of the guys that jump out in the next class, there's North Carolina's Sam Howell. I like him a lot.
He's a stud.
He is. And that's a guy to watch for next year, because he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be among the top quarterbacks taken, and probably the top returning quarterback, honestly. A couple of these other guys on the powerhouse schools are really young at that position. USC's quarterback's good, but I don't remember Pittsburgh. Have they ever had a USC quarterback? I can't remember.
No, I think the factor there is, and I know that for a fact, the factor there has got to be, he's going from playing a warm weather climate almost exclusively to coming out to Pittsburgh, where we get to October and we're going to start playing cold games. That's a challenge. That's a challenge.
It is. And so, like you said, it's the quarterback position is so important. The Steelers, their decision will be interesting to see if it is influenced by this. All these young, talented quarterbacks in the conference. The AFC playoffs have been fun. They've been fun to watch. I'm sorry that probably haven't been fun for you, but
no, it was perfectly fine. I'll tell you the truth. I was okay with what happened. I had to turn the volume off. I don't particularly like to listen to what they have to say, because I feel like there's leaning towards one way with the young and up and comers, and that's okay. I get it. That's your job. That's perfectly fine. But just watching it unfold, you talked about a defense that had 73 straight games with the sack, that couldn't beat guys that were on the practice squad, that didn't even take reps that week live in practice. They couldn't even get any pressure on on Mayfield, and then when they did get pressure, they were schemed up for it. Dump it to the back and let them go.
Well, and that's the thing too. One of the things I can see what your opinion, I'd be curious to see what your opinion is, honestly, is we do see a marriage between the college and NFL game. And I've seen it. The one thing with college that was brought out Monday, and I tweeted this stat out today. The college football championship game winner the last 7 years has averaged 41 points per game. Wow. 40.9. We'll round it up to 41. So your your minimum standard to be a national championship team is you have to have an offense that averages 40 points per game. Sure. Your defense can give up 25. It's a little bit different than what I grew up with, where how many times when you play high school football do you hear defense wins championships and those kind of things? That's no longer the case at the college game. And it's starting to spill over into the NFL. It hasn't started. It has. I mean, Kansas City, how do they win? They throw all over the place. Yeah. Green Bay is winning with an offense that scores over 30. They have an interesting matchups against the league's best defense this week. But I think that marriage of the concepts, too, has led to, a Baker Mayfield can come in and have success. Patrick Mahomes, I whiffed on him. I didn't think this guy's going to be a two-time MVP, maybe a Super Bowl champ. I just thought he was a good quarterback with a big arm in college, and you just never know. Josh Allen's another one. So it is an interesting how these college concepts have come to the NFL. And that's why you're seeing not only rumors about Urban Meyer coming to the NFL, but Ryan Day. He's already a hot name in the NFL. Dan Mullen, when they were talking about him, I don't know about that one. And I think it'll be vice versa. I think some NFL coaches will go back down to the college game and have some success.
Speaking of which, what'd you think about Harbaugh signing a 5-year extension at Michigan?
It's a weird thing because obviously I always tell young journalism students to try to see through the immediate reaction. So what happens when he signs? You see on Twitter and Facebook, Ohio State fans celebrating, and with good reason. He's 0-5 against them. The Buckeyes have a talent gap with Michigan that is pronounced and has grown since he's been there. But if you look at it strictly from Michigan's standpoint, it makes sense for both parties right now. It's a chance for Harbaugh to prove it. Yeah, you're not worth $9 million. But if we cut your salary, we make you go out and prove it. They have to change 3 things. They have to do what Notre Dame did after the 2016 season. Keep in mind, remember when Brian Kelly went 4-8? Yes. We thought it was over. What did he do? He went out, he beefed up recruiting, beefed up their offensive line. Notre Dame has an NFL offensive line every year. Yeah. They need some more speed on the perimeter. That's their next stage is to recruit that. But they're 43-8 since. And I think Harbaugh, that speaks for itself. Now, Harbaugh has to recruit Ohio better, has to get down in the Rust Belt and get kids that can play and get them up to Michigan, has to develop that talent better. I tell people this all the time. You can't count Tom Brady. Who's the biggest Michigan stud in the NFL? And people got to wait. They wait for a minute to come out. My answer would probably be Devin Bush, honestly. Okay. Devin Bush, or then there's some offensive linemen. I mean, Jabril Peppers is okay, but then who's the biggest Ohio State guy stud in the NFL? We'd go for 10 minutes.
Yeah, take your pick.
Boza, Young, any cornerback, Cam Hayward. There's so many. So I think that's another part of this equation. And then you got to go out and win some games on the field. His record isn't as bad as people think. It's just that record against Ohio State is what everybody sees first. And it is. It's a really glaring one. But here was a stat that I pulled out this year, and they didn't play. And it's either 1-22 or 1-23. Urban Meyer, since he came to Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan are either 1-22 or 1-23. I think it updated when Penn State lost to him this year. So it's not just Michigan's problem. Ohio State's everybody's problem in the Big Ten. I mean, Penn State's had some great teams that couldn't close the door against them, and Wisconsin has too. And I think in some ways Ohio State's broken the Big Ten. I know that sounds like an overreaction, but Ryan Day hasn't lost a Big Ten game yet.
Interesting you should say that, because I was on another podcast a while back, and I was talking with these guys, and we were talking about Ryan Day, and we were talking about the recruiting process, and I was trying to make them understand that your university does the recruiting for you. And in essence, the legacy, the mystique, the whatever's been coming through that university for years speaks for itself. And if you're a 4-star, 5-star, and they come knocking at your door, they're definitely in your top 2, 3, unquestionably. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is. And that's, I think Penn State and Michigan are so similar right now in some ways. I mean, and that goes back to the Harbaugh thing. Harbaugh's 3-3 against Penn State. And they generally have traded home beatdowns with the exception of this year. Penn State went into Michigan and won. James Franklin's done a good job recruiting. He really has. He's done a good job recruiting. It brought in talent. They had a COVID year where when you don't have Micah Parsons, you lose Journey Brown, things are going to go south.
That's tough.
Two of your best players, and then you lose to Indiana on, I still think the ball was out of bounds, by the way, but they're not calling. It's like you don't call foul on game point. So right. They got, that happened. So again, they're all chasing the Buckeyes. I mean, when I grew up in the 90s, I always tell people the kind of the golden age for me of Big Ten football was the early 90s when Michigan was full steam ahead. They win a national title in 97. Penn State's 94 team is as good as any team I've seen in the Big Ten with the offensive firepower. Ohio State was good every year. Wisconsin was coming on, but there wasn't a huge gap between 1 through 4. Now it's Ohio State's all the way up here, and when they lose a game, it's a complete fluke. It's the Iowa game. It's the Purdue game. It's the and Ryan Day. I can't believe I'm saying this, and I've said it a few times, so I've practiced this, but he's kind of taken what Urban Meyer did and enhanced the model somehow. And I didn't think that was possible when Urban Meyer retired.
Was he a strong recruiter? I mean, personally, like when he was just position coach under Meyer, was he a strong recruiter? Because that helps a lot.
Well, they have Brian Hartline has been one of their stronger recruiters, the former receiver, and he's getting guys out of Florida.
I remember him.
Yeah, and Day had been on the staff for 2 years, and he's really just revived that offense. It's a fun offense to play in, and that's another thing with college football that we've noticed the last few years. I mean, LSU last year, what did they have? They had Joe Burrow in a wide-open offense with unreal skill position talent. You can make an argument. I still think football starts with your offensive line, right? It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wide receivers become the third most important position in college football, maybe, behind quarterback and offensive line. I mean, look at the talent LSU had there. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall. This year, Alabama, the best player on the field Monday night was Devontae Smith. And it wasn't close. Yeah. And Jalen Waddle at 100% was Alabama's best receiver. That's the most amazing thing to me, is they had that much talent at that position. I mean, Mac Jones made great decisions with the football, and then you have Najee Harris on top of it. It's become that kind of game. And the NFL, I don't think they're at that point where it requires 40 points to win a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 5 years, and maybe we have that conversation again.
It's taken a lot of there's a lot of, well, first of all, I feel like they put the flag away a lot with holding. When it went from, you need to grab a guy inside the pads and, you're okay there. I see so much more in watching games. I see guys outside the pads and they're not throwing flags on it. They're watching it. So I think that in and of itself impacts the game. The run game, the pass game, doesn't matter. I think that impacts the game. The way the quarterback is treated. You come by, just a tap, they're throwing a flag on you. So, right. From that perspective, it has put the offense at an advantage, taking the defense off of the field. And that goes back to what you said. It used to be defense wins championships while offense wins games. I think you're right. I think you will see them continue to do that because, quite frankly, when people tune in to watch an NFL game, a college game, they want to see points, right? They want to see scores. They want to see a high-flying offense like we see today. They want to see it being fast. That being said, sticking with the college game, by the way, I can remember back, and I was a little kid, very little, but I can remember back to Archie Griffin winning the Heisman Trophy back-to-back years. That was amazing to watch that happen. And,
that and Archie, he's still prominent in Columbus. He's one of the classiest individuals possible. That was part of a different era where it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And it's funny now, I use this saying every once in a while. That was Woody Hayes' big saying, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Now it's 7 yards in a cloud of dust with your running game at the college level.
Oh, definitely.
And
definitely.
7, not a cloud of dust either. It's just they get up and they go again real quick. But yeah, I think that's really where the game's gone. It is very interesting to me too that Nick Saban is the one who has evolved the most. He gets the Belichick comparisons all the time. I mean, one of the things I said after Monday's game was, you look back at that team he had that beat LSU in the BCS championship game. That team allowed 8.3 points per game.
Wow.
It was a suffocating defense. It was a ground and pound team with Trent Richardson. They were boring. Remember, we were so bored with Alabama then?
Yeah.
Alabama's not boring now.
No.
They're fun to watch.
They're high flying. I mean, Sarkisian has done such a great job with that offense. He's so creative. Where's he going? I heard he's going somewhere. Where's he going?
Texas.
Okay.
And that's an interesting proposition for him. It's going to be a lot of pressure. I mean, Texas is high pressure. Other than Notre Dame, Michigan, Ohio State, I mean, that's the high pressure job of jobs.
Right.
But what he did at Alabama the last 2 years was remarkable. The play calling. I think the thing down there is recruiting, like everything else. I mean, Ohio State has several players from Texas on their team. So does Alabama, big time players. Garrett Wilson, the Brockmeyer twins down at Alabama. They'll be the next big offensive lineman. So he has to recruit well. Texas A&M starting to do that with Jimbo. So those two fan bases are interesting, though. I mean, it is so funny to watch two fan bases that don't play each other every year anymore. They probably argue as much as Browns and Steelers fans, or you know what I mean? It is.
I get it.
Wild.
No, I get it.
Texas and Texas A&M go back and forth, and it's a further case that they should play every year.
Man, other than Mac Brown, I mean, nobody's really held down the fort there in Texas with being substantial for how many years? I mean, it's been a long time since they've really been relevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mac, you know what? I mean, we talked a little bit about Sam Howell earlier. He's doing a remarkable job in North Carolina, and it reminds me of the late 90s when he was there the first time. If you go back and look, and I tell people this all the time, that's a program that I'm watching, because you look at his first stint there. Toward the end, there was guys like Vonnie Holliday, Ebenezer Ekubon, Dre Bly, Julius Peppers. They recruited Ronald Curry at the time, who was the top high school recruit in the nation. And a lot of those guys are on his staff. Dre Bly's on his staff now. So that's a program that's taken advantage of Mac, who learned from all that. Imagine going from like the highest pressure job possible, taking some time off, and then coming back to a place that wanted you back. And that's what he's done. And they've really taken off. Sam Howell will be a lot of fun. And, Steelers fans and others that are looking for that next quarterback, watch him pretty close, man. He can play.
My problem with that is, and I really don't like pigeonholing my podcast into Pittsburgh, even though it's still City Nation podcast. But my problem with that is Pittsburgh's going to go maybe 8-8 next year, 6-10, something like that. They're not going to be in position to draft a quarterback like Sam Howell. He's going to be gone right away. There's going to be somebody who vultures and goes back after a quarterback. It could be Washington next year, who goes and gets Sam Howell. It's hard to say, but I really think that they're going back to them. I think that their best option right now would be a guy like Winston, a guy who needs a second chance, like a Darnold, somebody who could come in there, no pressure on them. They beef up that offensive line. They get themselves a running back, somebody who can tote the rock, hit them 190, 100, 110 a game. That takes that pressure away from the quarterback. Those guys didn't have that where they were previously. And that should help with Pittsburgh.
No, yeah. And again, and we can talk AFC, NFC North, Big Ten, pit football all day long. I'm good because I enjoy doing that anyway, a little bit more. It will be interesting to see how they respond, because I don't think Cleveland's going away with the talent that they have.
No.
Cincinnati's behind. I think they need to take a step next year with Zach Taylor. I don't know how big the step needs to be, but it needs to be a step, right? And then Baltimore's as steady as Pittsburgh's been franchise. And then that's kind of the franchise, those are steady franchises for the most part. Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and I would anticipate that continues. So, it'll be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting weekend this weekend if either Baltimore or Cleveland can win.
Yeah,
and I think Baltimore's got a decent chance at it, and Cleveland's got a little bit to deal with on the back end with Kansas City. But I think Baltimore's got a chance.
well, like you said about Josh Allen, though, that kid, he was definitely a kid that I thought Pittsburgh should have been keeping a close eye on when he was coming out, because I mean, you looked at all his numbers and everything, and they hated him in Buffalo for the first couple of years. They absolutely hated him.
Right.
The fans. I have some good friends that are Buffalo fans, and they just thought he was garbage. But he had the whole cosmetic makeup. He could throw the ball. He could throw it on the run. He could run the ball. He was a team leader. So now it comes to fruition. Hey, could we jump back to college for a second? Just for a second. Did you think a team like Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina should have been in the conversation for the college playoffs? Should the college playoffs maybe expanded to 8 teams to give those teams an opportunity?
Okay, well, let's walk through this together because it's always a complicated conversation. I thought Cincinnati was the most deserving team for the 4th playoff spot. Playing all their games. Luke Fickell's done a fantastic job down there. They would not beat Ohio State. They didn't beat Ohio State the year before. They lost 42-0. But if we're talking about resume and those kind of things, they did what was necessary. And so Mike DeCourcy, who you had on here, and I had this argument about a month ago, got pretty heated because as I said, I'm a Mac graduate, went to Ohio, watched I was at OU when Roethlisberger was down in Miami. He ripped our heart out one Saturday. But I've always thought that the group of 5 should do their own playoff until there's an 18 playoff. And here's how I would do it. I said, so imagine Coastal and UAB, I guess they won. We could throw them out. Like Coastal, UAB, Buffalo, San Jose State. They won the Midwest Conference.
Yeah, they did. I
think there would be much more interest if those 4 teams played their own playoffs. It might not last forever. There'd be a novelty to it. And Mike keeps telling me, well, go play in the FCS. I understand that, but your field as the season starts, 65 teams are not playing for the playoff before the ball's kicked off. They've shown they're never going to take a group of 5 team in a 4-team playoff with UCF and Cincinnati. That's fact.
Right.
About another 40 in the Power 5 aren't good enough to compete for a national championship, and that's what has led to this exclusivity. So would an 18 playoff? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't think an 18 playoff solves that right away. I think you get a group of 5 team in there, and more teams get to go to the playoffs. But is that going to solve beating Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State? I don't know if there's a perfect answer because, my son's 10 and he knows nothing but Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. And I'm assuming most 17 to 18-year-olds that are looking for a college choice know the same thing.
Ironically, should say that. Let me just start with this. We have a kid from my high school. He was one of the top recruits in the country at receiver. And he was offered by Alabama. He was offered by Ohio State. He was offered by everybody. He ends up choosing West Virginia. West Virginia, which I thought was really interesting. He was going to go to Penn State. He likes the receivers coach. The guy did a nice job of building a relationship with him, getting him on board. Clearly the kid liked the guy because the guy then went from Penn State to West Virginia as offensive coordinator, and he reeled him in. Me personally, if it was my son, when you talk about a 17 or 18-year-old looking at where he's going to go, you have to decide where you want to go after you're playing if you have that skill level. And I don't know, he'll probably get an opportunity if he plays that well at West Virginia, but he truly would have got an opportunity if he went to Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, one of those other schools. I don't know about the 18. I agree with you. I think it's just so difficult because it's so top heavy. And you have laid it out there over and over again in our discussion. It's so top heavy that it's hard for a team like Cincinnati. Let's say Cincinnati let's say they end up matching up with like Notre Dame and they beat Notre Dame. Okay. Then they got to go play in Alabama. That's not going to happen. That's not going to work.
Well, and the semifinals have even been blowouts in large part. I mean, there are people that would argue that the BCS model was better. I don't think that's the case. I enjoy the 14 playoff. I understand the mathematical problem of it. When you're already squeezing 5 conferences into 4 chairs, somebody gets left out every year.
Right.
I get that. I do think there are some parts of an 18 plan that I would endorse, and there are a couple things. If they went to 8, I want the first round on campus. I want when we're allowed to get back to games, right? I want Georgia at Madison, Wisconsin for an 18.
Sure.
I want Boise to go to, Tuscaloosa and see what happened, or vice versa somehow. That would be amazing. I think you could get rid of the conference championship games in that event in some ways. Now, so other people are like, no, you got to play them. But what happens when 4-loss Northwestern beats an 11-1 Penn State team? So we're taking the 4-loss team. What do we do? Maybe you get rid of divisions in the conferences then. There are everybody has an 18 plan, and I still don't think there's a perfect 18 plan. That's just my opinion.
It's a difficult thing to put together. And plus, you and I both know it. This is all about the money. That's why we had all those bowl games to begin with. They figured out a way to have a boatload of bowl games. And I can honestly say that I probably watched more bowl games, number one, because I'm working from home. But number two, I found it intriguing to watch some of those games. That Marshall, who did Marshall play?
Buffalo.
Yeah. I found that an intriguing game. I watched San Jose play. I was, they're not great players out there, but there are some guys that shine. It was good football. It was sound football. And that's what I like watching. Again, going back to our conversation a while ago, I'm a football guy. I like watching football,
Yeah. So, and I think that's the playoff will expand when they want to expand. It's not going to expand because of Twitter. It's not going to expand because of UCF or Cincinnati or the next group of 5 team that goes undefeated. It's not going to expand, until they decide, the power brokers in college football decide that they want that TV money, that they want to expand it. Now, I'll be the first to say this. I was against the super wild card weekend in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And I like that we're jumping back and forth here. But last weekend, that was pretty cool.
I liked it.
The triple hitter was pretty cool because I was thinking, and this comes as a little bit of a selfish Green Bay fan perspective. So if I take that off for a second, you think
it's okay.
I was thinking in week 17, okay, if Green Bay loses the Bears somehow and they fall all the way down to the 3, I'm going to be upset. And again, in past year, it would be the focus is you want that first round bye. You want that road to go through Lambeau. And it's interesting to see how teams are playing that now. I mean, what is the difference between a 2 and a 3 now? We're going to find out. I mean, but I do think the extra game did create more excitement. It was fun to watch wild card football all weekend. And the NFL is usually, as they usually do, they scored a win there.
Yeah, definitely. I thought as crazy as COVID has been, and don't misunderstand me here, but I thought it has offered some creativeness, in Major League Baseball, in the NFL. I thought those guys approached it with a creative mind, and I can truly appreciate that. And I hope they take a look at that and decide maybe we can pull some of this and make this continue to happen because our ratings were great. The only game I really did not enjoy and ended up turning off was the Bears game.
But that, I guess that's the back end of it. And you raise a good point. When you let a 7th team in, some years the 7th team in a conference is not good. I mean, we had a team with a losing record, and now the NFC East, it's its own special breed of that was bad this year. But Washington played well. Washington didn't play awful with a backup quarterback. There's going to be years that's going to happen. And sometimes the shift in the conferences will determine that. And that goes back to what we've been talking about this whole time. The AFC has teams. They had teams left out of the playoffs that were, Miami's up and coming. Yeah. They're not bad. The NFC, I don't think there's any team that can say, man, we should have been there.
Yeah,
maybe Arizona, maybe, but no. I mean, they had their chances down the stretch. So
weren't they 8-8? Didn't they finish 8-8? Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. So you're right. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. And once you get into an 8-team college football playoff to kind of do the slide over, there's going to be some teams that we're going to watch and be like, why are they playing them? Yeah. Why is a 3-loss, you know, I'm going to pick on a school. I don't want to do that unnecessarily. Like a 3-loss Oregon team playing at, you know, if it's a loaded Florida team one year, we're going, why did we watch that? But the tipping point for me, and here's where I think the tipping point's going to be. We watch these New Year's Day Six Bowls, and you've noticed the opt-outs, right? Florida's entire receiving corps opted out.
Yeah.
I think when the New Year's Day Six will run into a problem when a guy like Kyle Trask sits out of that bowl game. Because they can't. And Sam Darnold a couple years ago when they played against Ohio State, I kept asking people, what if Sam Darnold opts out of this bowl game? Then what do we do? Because then it's hard.
You think that's fair that those guys do that? Like I understand their standpoint. You know, they could have a career-ending injury in a bowl game, which is their last college game. But on the other side of the coin, you know, they got a lot of money, college scholarship money, et cetera, to play for that team, to be a productive member of it, to represent that university. I don't know.
I'm conflicted. I'm really conflicted on this because I've always kind of taken the approach, I'm not going to tell a 21-year-old what to do. I'm not going to say you have to play in this game, but I'm also, there's a second side to that, right? So I don't mind when Kyle Pitts opts out of a bowl game. He's going to be a top 10 pick. I get it. But I also didn't like it the other night when people were telling Jalen Waddle he needs to sit out of the bowl game. He had a good season. He wanted to be out there. He was hurt, but he wanted to be there. And I think it's one of those things where he wanted to play. You can't tell. He wanted to be a part of that national championship team, and that's part of that Alabama difference that I'm talking about. Like, they had guys out there playing hurt.
Yeah.
And people can judge that all you want, but that's the culture they've built. And a lot of those guys, you know, Jalen Waddle is going to be fine. It's not like he broke his leg forever last night. He wanted to play a couple plays. So I'm not going to judge him either.
Right. It was interesting, too, because I did see a lot of people, pro athletes, pro NFL players saying, you know, Waddle doesn't need to be out there. I could be wrong, but I think Mahomes was one of those guys who actually tweeted something out about it. And I was kind of like, man, let the kid go. Let the kid go. He may not have this opportunity ever again. He might play for a lousy NFL team and maybe never make the playoffs. Who knows what his career has to hold for him, but he's on a huge stage here right now. He's just going to go to a position after this where he's going to make money for doing what he does. But this is a totally driven opportunity for him. All right. So we talked Sam Howell. Who else you think is going to be in the running for the Heisman next year?
I always start a quarterback, even though this year we had a different one. I mean, I think Bryce Young will be in a setup at Alabama where it's there. I think DJ Uiagalelei. I got that right.
Yeah.
I had to learn all year. I like Tagovailoa. I had to learn. You know, it takes a minute, but they'll be set up for success there. Oklahoma was the team that kind of won bowl season outside of the playoff with the performance they had against Florida.
Yeah.
Spencer Rattler played really well. The running backs were really good. And Marvin Mims, the young playmakers they had, if they don't lose to Kansas State, they would have been in the playoff. It would have been really interesting to see. So I think they're a team to keep an eye on. They'll be the it team, and Spencer Rattler's a guy that will continue to pile up statistics next year. I can't pick a Pac-12 Heisman favorite. I mean, Keaton Slovis probably have a big year at USC. And then whoever comes out of Ohio State's quarterback race, they've got some guys coming in, and that's where that race starts. But you know what? I always tell people about the Heisman, and I'm glad you brought it up earlier. So, like, the way you phrased it was Trevor Lawrence lost the Heisman. You're right, but it's so hard to pick this award. And I say, and nobody saw Devontae Smith winning that award back in January. Nobody saw, you know, Lamar Jackson coming the one year. Nobody saw RG3 coming the one year. So all of those things are really interesting to see as we go along. So I think next year we have that list of favorites. I typically go with the guys on the best teams, but that award's always got a couple. Joe Burrow, how about that one? I mean, I wish I was in Vegas and would have put $20 on that one.
All right, so I know you're on a time crunch. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who you see coming out of the AFC? Who you see coming out of the NFC?
Oh man, you're gonna make. I don't want to curse my team here. Now, objectively speaking, I think we're gonna get Green Bay and Kansas City. And I know that's not taking a reach. I think they're going to take it. Those are two places where, even with limited fans, the home field matters for different reasons. For Green Bay, it's bringing New Orleans or Los Angeles up there in the cold. What I think could disrupt that, the two teams that can disrupt that most, Tampa Bay. They've got it clicking with Tom, and I've been saying to my wife every night, I'm really worried about playoff Tom, and she's just laughing at me. I was like, I'm really worried about him coming up to Lambeau. So they got to take care of the Rams first. AFC wise, Buffalo could disrupt that? The Browns, who knows? I mean, we'll see what they do with the Chiefs, and there's always one upset in there that we can't see coming. But I think we get what the networks definitely want is Kansas City, Green Bay, because they can sell Mahomes, Rodgers, big play offenses. And that game, so let me ask you that. If that was the Super Bowl, the final of the college football playoff championship game was 52-24, 76 points. Is the Super Bowl clearing 76 points if we get Mahomes and Rodgers?
I don't think either defense can hold the other offense back. So
it's going to get up in that neighborhood, and offense sells. So that's what I'm looking at, and that's what I'm going to pick. I hope I'm right. I'm not going to pick a winner there because then I have to pick Kansas City.
I don't want to watch Tampa Bay play in the playoffs. I don't want to watch Tom Brady. He looks like a shell of himself to me. I watched him play enough this year, and this is no knock on him. Where most Pittsburgh fans hate Tom Brady, I've come to respect his game. I've recognized the players he's had around him and how he's taken guys that essentially are marginal players, and he's produced with those guys. He did a fantastic job in the system he was in. He really had to make a switch down there. I mean, playing for Bruce Arians, let's face it, Bruce Arians, he had Jameis Winston, who was the league leader in passing, 2 years ago, last year, whatever. But he also threw 30 interceptions because he had to hold the ball so long so his guys could get downfield. All right. Tom Brady has done a nice job there. The running game is not much to be recognized with. And I don't think their defenses, I think they're a middle of the road defense. I think if they have to match up with Green Bay, they're going to struggle unless Green Bay is not able to run the ball.
Well, we'll watch Green Bay this weekend. What to watch is how do they go up against that really good Rams disruptive defensive line. The David Bakhtiari injury was huge. And then I was even asking our NFL writer, I was like, so if you're the Rams, are you putting Ramsey on Devontae every play? I mean, he said they typically don't flip, but maybe they would. You almost have to there because you can't. Are you wasting downs where you're keeping Jalen Ramsey on Allen Lazard or MVS?
Yeah.
And that's a matchup to watch. But I think Aaron Rodgers has shown this year in the second year of LaFleur's system how good he can be, how mature. I know a lot of people take swipes at his leadership style or whatever. He's been a pretty good leader this year. He's been MVP worthy in every way. And I tell people this all the time. It's such a bizarre thing to say, given all the success he's had. He's played in 4 NFC championship games, and none of them have been at home. So I want to, they've never played at home.
That's unbelievable to think about.
If he gets the one at home, Green Bay hasn't had a 1 seed and hosted the NFC championship in the same season since '96, and that worked out for Brett Favre and that team.
Does Rodgers sign a new deal after this year, or does he move on, or does he retire?
That's going to be an interesting conversation. I think the Jordan Love pick got a lot of publicity, and deservedly so. They could have used that pick on a T. Higgins or a Cole Kmet or somebody else. He looks like he's having fun, and he's got a fun setup with LaFleur. I think that relationship's really good. So, I mean, these next couple of weeks will be interesting to see. I think he's got some good football left. You're always resigned when, it's kind of the same way with Favre, that you're resigned that he will probably play for somebody else at some point.
Yeah.
But, everybody goes through that. Patriots fans went through that. 49ers fans went through that with Montana. Those guys are going to play as long as they want to play. So you got to think at some point that will probably happen.
Hell, him and LaFleur are probably close in age, aren't they?
I think Rodgers. Yeah, I think Rodgers is older, or they're close. They're really
close in age, right?
Yeah. So that makes it an interesting dynamic. And LaFleur, you got to give him credit, man. The 13-3 back-to-back seasons. They lost 1 division game, and that was on a game where Dalvin Cook got hot in the second half, and they couldn't stop him. And a chance to get back to the NFC Championship game. I mean, as far as my lifetime, it's the most impressive start since Mike Holmgren. And Holmgren was you knew they were going to be better, but I didn't think they'd be this good this fast.
What do you think about the longevity of a coach in the NFL today? Do you think it's I ask that simply because you still have a guy like Tomlin in Pittsburgh, and if you look at his track record the last 10 years, it has not been good in postseason. The big thing in Pittsburgh is the guy has never had a losing season, but isn't it about winning championships? I mean, the bottom line is about winning championships or having an opportunity to win a championship. Having an 8-8 season, a 9-7 season, a 10-6 season, losing in the first round or not making the playoffs, just because you had a winning season doesn't make you a championship caliber coach. What do you think about a guy who's been around 16 years? I know Belichick has, but Belichick had his problems this year. We saw that just based on of his roster turning over. What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, it's different than college in some ways. I mean, a guy could spend 25 years at one college and I don't blink. I mean, Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern is a good example. I don't think he'll ever get fired because he's brought that program to places and he's an alum. And so I think I don't have any like data to back this up, but it always seems to me like that 8 to 10 year range, at some point, a new message comes along. You'd have to be hyper successful. Not Belichick's an exception. I don't even count him. They had so much success, it doesn't really count. But I mean, like even you look at Andy Reid, the message fell flat in Philly, even though he had all that success there, and he was able to kind of reinvent his career in Kansas City. And I would argue he is a much better coach now, but some of that is tied to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I mean, if Alex Smith was still the quarterback of the Chiefs, would we look at them at Andy Reid as the same way as we did?
I don't know how their offense would be created. I think part of that's because Bieniemy has done a fantastic job with their offense. But going back to Belichick just a little bit, his coaching tree, a lot of the guys he's moved on, he's brought in new guys. It's a different voice in that locker room. Right. And I think that in and of itself is significant. Where I see a team like Pittsburgh, again, I'm referring back to them, even though I really didn't want to, but where I see a team like that, I think they're hearing the same message from Tomlin, and the guys he brings in are staying status quo, same type of offense. They went from Arians to Haley to Fichtner. They're just kind of rolling forward with a quarterback coaches and philosophy. And I think at some point, because the way the game's changing, we're talking about it, you're seeing 35, 40 points a game. You have got to change your strategy, your take on how you need to approach it in order to make it more exciting and have a different brand of winning football as opposed to what you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be questions for them. I mean, I think, as you know, being in Ohio, that was a Bengals question for years with Marvin Lewis, who, again, there's a guy that now that there's some openings, people are saying he's an interesting candidate. I mean, I was talking to my buddy about, my best friend's a huge Bengals fan. We were talking about Marvin Lewis. I said, he makes the argument. I mean, he brought them up from some pretty low depths as a franchise. And then once you start getting into the playoffs, they start expecting playoff wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that didn't happen in Cincinnati. And somehow, and we all remember the games. I covered I still tell people that the Steelers-Bengals wildcard game that I covered is the single craziest sporting event I've ever covered because of the last 2 minutes alone. I had to rewrite my story like 7 times. And you just play off the emotion of that game. And that was kind of the end of the Lewis era right there. But he did elevate the franchise in some ways. He just couldn't win a playoff game. So that is what they had there. I think there is something to, whereas Cleveland, shuffling coaches in and out, that never works.
No.
You're going to do it that way. That's not going to work either. So I think they've finally found their guy, at least a coach that is going to be around for a little bit, Kevin Stefanski.
Let's get to our final question. I call this my decade definer. It's a little bit of a different approach to it, though. Top 5 teams heading into 2021 college football season that, based on what you think, your knowledge after what was not such a normal 2020 season. Who are our top 5 teams?
It starts with Alabama. I always joke that the season doesn't start until Alabama loses. And so some years it doesn't start, and at least 2 under Saban. They'll bring in playmakers around Bryce Young. Some of those guys you saw late last night are going to step in, and they may have some bumps, but they're going to be really good. 2, you got to go Clemson. I mean, we saw what DJ Uiagalelei could do. They're going to dominate the ACC. They have the easiest road. And some of those young defensive linemen they had, like Brian Bresee. And
he's from I saw him play in high school. I've known that kid I've watched him play since he was a youth football player.
He's going to be a first-round pick in a few years, right? I think we're going to go on that.
Unquestionably. He could have played at the collegiate level as a 10th grader.
Yeah, he just – that experience he got this year will pay off. Their defense will be better. I think Ohio State's 3. It's hard to pick another team in the Big Ten. I mean, they'll have to figure out quarterback if Justin Fields goes to the NFL, but they've got a lot of talent at receiver, and we talked about that earlier. Like Oklahoma at 4 right now, that can change. They proved they could beat an SEC school in a bowl game, even though it was one without a lot of guys. Lincoln Riley can really coach offense. And then 5's open-ended. I think it's Georgia for now. JT Daniels kind of up that offense. They've recruited so well that it's impossible for them to be bad. Now the next thing for them, talk about a franchise or a school, and they haven't won a national championship since 1980 with Herschel Walker. Yeah. And for all the success they've had every year that Kirby doesn't win it, and you kind of hinted at that with the NFL thing. Every year that Kirby doesn't win it, it's going to start to feel like Mark Richt all over again. So that's something to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, I want to thank you a lot, Bill. Tell people where they can find you on social media so they can go ahead and follow you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm at Bill Bender 92. I'm on Facebook at Bill Bender. This was an enjoyable. I like podcasts where it's just kind of a free-flowing conversation. That's exactly what we had. And you're just pretty much, that's my life. It's shuffling between NFL and college football and youth sports and everything else. It was a lot of fun coming on here, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
Around draft time or something.
I'd love to do some a fantasy talk with you when we get closer to that time too. It'll be fantastic. So I will definitely be in touch with you. Again, I appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the NFL playoffs. I guess go Pack, go.
Yeah, we can do that. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
All right.